Tonight, as the world outside prepares for its own quiet slumber, we too shall prepare to drift, not into dreams of our own making, but into the gentle rhythm of a day long past. We will journey back, if you would care to join me, to a time when lives were measured not by clocks in a city apartment, but by the slow turning of the sun and the patient turning of the earth. So, perhaps you can find a comfortable position now, in your favorite chair or nestled beneath your softest blanket, and allow your thoughts to quiet. Perhaps you might dim the lights, just a little, allowing the soft shadows to lengthen and deepen around you. And if, by the end of our tranquil journey, you find a sense of peace, a quiet contentment, then perhaps you might consider a gentle tap of the like button, or even subscribe if you wish to join us again for more such wanderings. Our journey begins, as all new days must, with the first, almost imperceptible whisper of dawn. It is not a sudden burst of brilliance, but rather a slow, deliberate unfolding across the eastern sky. Imagine, if you will, the deepest indigo of the pre-dawn heavens, a rich, velvety expanse, slowly, almost reluctantly, beginning to surrender its hold. A faint, almost blush-like hue, a very pale rose perhaps, begins to bleed into the horizon, tentatively at first, then spreading, like watercolors across a vast canvas. The stars, which just moments before had glittered with such fierce determination, now begin to recede, their brilliance softening, dimming, becoming almost transparent against this encroaching paleness. There is a profound stillness in these moments, a quietude that seems to hold its breath. The air itself feels different, crisp and cool, carrying the scent of damp earth, of dew-laden grass, and a faint, sweet promise of what the new day might bring. It is a world still very much asleep, a world wrapped in the lingering embrace of night, yet with the first undeniable signs of awakening now painting the distant eastern rim. The shadows, which had been long and definitive, begin to soften, their edges blurring just a fraction, as if unsure of their own presence in this nascent light. And then, into this profound quiet, a sound emerges, a herald, a declaration. From somewhere in the nearby coop, a rooster's crow breaks the stillness. It is not a polite, refined sound, but a guttural, vibrant clarion call, rich with a certain rustic authority. This first crow is often followed by another, perhaps a little further off, then another, creating a gentle, rippling chorus that echoes across the as yet unlit fields. These sounds, though sharp, possess a comforting familiarity in this rural setting, a dependable rhythm that has marked the turning of days for generations. Within the farmhouse, a subtle stirring begins. The thick farmhouse walls, built often of timber or brick, had held the night's coolness, and the air inside still carries a trace of sleep, a faint scent of wood smoke from yesterday's fire, and the particular, indefinable aroma of a well-lived-in home. Perhaps a floorboard creaks softly upstairs, a very subtle protest against the weight of a foot just now descending. A gentle rustle of bedding might be heard, a sigh, a slow stretch of limbs preparing to greet the day. These are not sudden, jarring awakenings, but rather a slow, almost unconscious return to awareness, a gentle rejoining with the world. The warmth of the bed, perhaps a feather mattress or one filled with straw, still clings to the body, making the decision to leave its comfort a small, gentle negotiation. But the demands of the farm are as immutable as the rising sun, and so, one by one, the inhabitants of the farmstead begin to stir. There is a sense of anticipation, not of excitement, but of acceptance, of readiness. The day is calling, and they, in their quiet way, are answering. The world outside may still be cloaked in shadows, but within these walls, the gentle currents of life are beginning to flow once more, preparing for the tasks that await. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a landscape of wide open spaces and the rhythm of the rising sun. Imagine, if you will, the cool pre-dawn air, the scent of damp earth, and the distant promise of a new day unfolding across the vast American plains. As you settle into your most comfortable spot, perhaps dimming the lights, allowing only the soft glow of your screen to illuminate the room, let the gentle hum of my voice guide you through a day, a quiet, purposeful day, on a 1930s farm. If, by the end of our journey, you find yourself feeling a little more rested, a little more at peace, perhaps consider a quiet moment to like or subscribe, helping us to share these gentle narratives with others. Our journey continues now, as the first slivers of dawn begin to paint the eastern sky, still a deep, inky blue in the west, but softening to hues of rose and gold on the horizon. Even before the sun had fully cleared the tree-line, before its warmth could truly penetrate the cool morning air, the farm was already stirring, not with urgency, but with a deep, ingrained purpose. This was a time when the very rhythm of life was dictated by the sun's journey and the needs of the land, an unwavering commitment that knew no holidays, no sick days, no quarter. For the farm family, the concept of a leisurely breakfast, of lingering in bed until the sun was high, was an unfamiliar luxury. The morning chores commenced well before the smell of coffee could draw anyone out. Indeed, the very essence of the farm's survival relied upon these pre-dawn labors, a testament to the symbiotic relationship between humans and the animals they cared for, the land they cultivated. The first, and often most critical, task of the morning, especially on a dairy farm, was the milking of the cows. Imagine the soft, rhythmic sound of milk streaming into a metal pail, a soothing cadence that filled the pre-dawn quiet of the barn. The air would be thick with the earthy scent of hay, a whisper of manure, and the warm, bovine breath of the animals. Each cow, a creature of habit, would stand patiently, perhaps shifting her weight, her large eyes blinking slowly in the dim light cast by a lantern or a single, bare bulb. The farmer, or one of the older children, would sit on a low stool, leaning into the cow's flank, their hands working with practiced ease, a dance perfected over countless mornings. The milk, warm and frothy, would quickly fill the pail, a tangible reward for their early rising, a direct contribution to the day's sustenance. Sometimes, the younger children, still a little sleepy, might be allowed to sit nearby, watching the hypnotic flow, maybe even offering a gentle pat to a cow's broad side, absorbing the quiet lessons of responsibility and animal husbandry that were simply a part of their world. Beyond the milking, the entire menagerie of farm animals required attention. The chickens, roused by the first hint of daylight, would be clucking softly, eagerly awaiting their breakfast. Grain would be scattered, sometimes by a child with a small tin scoop, watching the iridescent plumage of the hens as they scratched and pecked with gusto. And with the feeding came the collection of eggs, a daily treasure hunt. Imagine reaching into a nest box, your fingers gently sifting through soft straw, to find an egg, still warm from the hen, its shell smooth and delicate. These eggs, gathered gently in a wicker basket, were more than just food, they were a symbol of the farm's productivity, a fresh bounty for the breakfast table. The hogs too, those boisterous eaters, would be awaiting their slops, a mixture of kitchen scraps and grain. Their grunts and snorts would break the morning stillness, a primal chorus of hunger and satisfaction. The horses, those noble beasts of burden, would need their hay and fresh water, their coats often brushed down, their hooves checked. Even the barn cats, those silent guardians of the grain stores, would weave around legs, purring softly, hoping for a splash of milk or a scrap of food. These routines, these daily acts of care, were non-negotiable. They were the very bedrock of farm life. Rain or shine, sleet or snow, the animals depended on their human caregivers, and the humans depended on the animals. There was no room for delay, no possibility of ignoring these commitments. On a cold, biting winter morning, with frost painting intricate patterns on the barn windows, hands aching from the chill despite thick gloves, the milking still had to be done. On a sweltering summer day, with the air thick and heavy, the animals still needed their water, the chickens their feed. This unwavering consistency forged a deep sense of responsibility in every member of the family, from the youngest child entrusted with scattering chicken feed to the seasoned farmer guiding the milking pail. It was a life lived in direct communion with nature's demands, a silent agreement to uphold the delicate balance of the farm, ensuring its survival, day after tireless day. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a rhythm of life set by the sun and the soil. Imagine with me, if you will, the gentle embrace of the past, as we explore a day on a 1930s farm. Settle in, perhaps dimming your lights a little, and simply allow these quiet words to wash over you. If, by the end, you find a measure of peace, a soft whisper of calm, please consider leaving a like or subscribing, so that we may share more such journeys together. The initial chill of the morning, slowly receding as the sun climbed higher, soon gave way to the soft promise of breakfast. This was not a hurried affair, or a light repast designed for quick consumption. No, this was the foundational meal of the day, the quiet engine that would soon power bodies through hours of demanding toil. The kitchen, still carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from the banked embers in the stove, would begin to fill with the warm, rich perfume of cooking food. A full, hearty breakfast was the standard, a tradition born of necessity and sustained by the bounty of their own land. Imagine, if you can, the soft clatter of cast iron as a heavy skillet was placed upon the hot surface of the wood-burning range, its seasoned depths soon to be filled with the golden richness of farm-fresh eggs. Perhaps a dozen, even more, would be cracked with practiced ease, their vibrant yolks gleaming, ready to be scrambled or fried sunny side up, each one a small, perfect orb of sustenance. Beside them, strips of home-cured bacon, perhaps from a hog butchered just weeks before, would sizzle and curl, releasing its irresistible, smoky aroma into the air. The sound itself was a lullaby of impending nourishment, a prelude to the energy that would soon be flowing through tired limbs. Biscuits, light and flaky, made with flour from the grist mill down the road and buttermilk from their own cows, would emerge from the oven, their tops a golden brown, their interiors steaming with warmth. A small bowl of freshly churned butter, a pale yellow, would be waiting, along with a jar of homemade fruit preserves, perhaps strawberry or peach, picked and put up during the summer months. These simple, wholesome ingredients, born of hard work and careful stewardship, formed the heart of this morning meal. And then, of course, there was the coffee. Not from fancy machines or intricate brews, but robust, dark, and plentiful, brewed strong in a large enamel pot on the back of the stove. Its rich, earthy fragrance would mingle with the other scents, creating an enveloping envelope of comfort and warmth. It was more than just a beverage, it was a ritual, a silent promise of wakefulness and strength to come. Each steaming cup, poured into thick ceramic mugs, offered solace and a gentle jolt, preparing minds and bodies for the tasks ahead. The family, drawn by these enticing aromas, would begin to gather. This was a central moment of the day, a pause in the relentless march of chores. They would settle together around a sturdy wooden table, often crafted by hand, its surface worn smooth by years of use, its edges perhaps rounded by countless elbows and forearms. This table was more than just furniture, it was the heart of the home, the place where stories were shared, plans were made, and simple comforts were found. A long bench might run along one side, accommodating several children, while adults took their places on solid, straight-backed chairs. The atmosphere was one of quiet efficiency, a shared understanding of the effort both given and received. There was little fuss, no elaborate fanfare, just the steady serving of food, passed from hand to hand, each person taking their portion with a silent nod of appreciation. The conversation, if any, would be soft, low, and often practical. Perhaps a comment about the clarity of the morning sky, or a gentle reminder about a particular duty for the day. But for the most part, it was a time for quiet eating, for the slow, methodical assimilation of the energy that this generous breakfast provided. The warmth of the food, the comforting presence of family, and the steady rhythm of their shared meal created a moment of tranquility before the day's demanding labor truly began. It was a silent sacrament, a pledge of strength, a quiet preparation for a day lived in intimate connection with the land. And as the last crumbs were cleared and the final drops of coffee were savored, a subtle shift would occur, a quiet readiness settling over them all, as the farm itself began to call, beckoning them to the day's unfolding tasks. The sun was now higher, the air fully awake, and the rhythm of the farm was beginning its deliberate, unchanging march. And now, as the morning's chores begin to recede into a soft hum of memory, our gaze turns outward, beyond the sheltering walls of the farmhouse, toward the vast, open expanse that truly defines so much of the farm's existence. This was the domain of the fields, a landscape that shifted and changed with the seasons, demanding a constant, patient attention. It was here, under the broad arc of the sky, that the farmer and his family spent the greater part of their waking hours, their bodies moving in rhythm with the land, their hands shaping its promise into sustenance. The core of this unending cycle was, of course, the soil itself, that rich, dark earth beneath the feet, brimming with a silent, potential energy. Preparing this soil for new life was a monumental undertaking, often beginning with the slow, deliberate art of plowing. Imagine, if you will, the gentle creak of leather harness, the steady, rhythmic clop of a draft horse's hooves as it pulled a heavy plow through the stubble of the previous year's harvest. The air might be crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and perhaps a faint, sweet hint of alfalfa from a nearby field. The plowshare, a gleaming blade of steel, would cut deep into the ground, turning over the dark, moist soil in a long, unbroken ribbon, exposing its hidden depths to the warming sun and the revitalizing air. This was not a hurried process, each furrow needed to be straight, each turn precise, to ensure an even distribution of nutrients and proper aeration. A farmer's plowing was a testament to his skill and his patience, a careful dance between man, beast, and implement. Sometimes, depending on the size of the farm and the crops being cultivated, this plowing might be done with a more advanced, though still rudimentary, piece of machinery. Perhaps a tractor, sputtering and chugging, its iron wheels slowly turning, would pull a larger multiple-bottom plow, covering more ground with each pass. Even then, the pace remained unhurried, a steady churning of soil under a watchful eye. The air around such an engine might be thick with the smell of gasoline and hot metal, a different kind of olfactory tapestry than the natural scent of the turned earth. Regardless of the power source, the objective remained the same, to break up compacted soil, tobery weeds, and to create a fine, loose seedbed where tender young plants could take root and thrive. Once the plowing was complete, the fields transformed into a series of long, parallel furrows, awaiting the next stage. This often involved further refinement of the soil, harrowing and disking to break down the larger clods, smoothing the surface into a fine, crumbly texture. The sound of the harrows dragging across the field, a gentle scraping, almost like a sigh, would signify this preparation, creating a pristine canvas for the planting to come. And then, with the soil made ready, came the quiet, hopeful act of planting. Here again, the methods might vary. For some crops, particularly smaller grains like wheat or oats, a seed drill might be employed. This remarkable, though simple, machine would open small trenches, deposit seeds at a consistent depth, and then cover them with soil, all in one continuous motion. The sound would be a soft, mechanical whirring, punctuated by the occasional rattle of seeds being released. The farmer, perched on a small seat, would guide the drill, his eyes scanning the even rows emerging behind it, a silent conversation between him and the land. For other crops, especially those requiring more careful spacing like corn or vegetables, planting was often a much more hands-on affair. Imagine a line of family members, perhaps neighbors who had come to lend a hand, moving slowly across the field, stooped over, each carrying a bucket or pouch filled with seeds. Their hands, calloused and practiced, would deftly drop a precise number of seeds into carefully spaced holes, then cover them gently with a pat of earth. There would be sounds of quiet conversation, the rustle of clothing, the gentle thud of small clods of soil. This was a communal effort, a shared investment in the future that bound families and communities together. The warm sun on their backs, the earthy scent filling their nostrils, the quiet concentration in their eyes, these were the sensory experiences of a day spent planting by hand. The physical demands of this field work were undeniable, a constant test of strength and endurance. Plowing required not just physical might but also a steady hand to guide the animal or machine, ensuring straight lines and uniform depth. Planting, whether with machinery or by hand, involved hours of walking, bending, lifting, and repetitive motions, often under the direct, unfiltered gaze of the sun. Muscles would ache, backs would stiffen, and minds would become focused on the singular task at hand, ignoring the passing hours. And then there was the ever-present, all-encompassing factor of the weather, a capricious force that dictated so much of the farm's rhythm. A sudden downpour could halt plowing for days, turning freshly tilled fields into impassable mud. A late spring frost could threaten newly planted seedlings, demanding anxious nights of vigilance. A prolonged drought could bake the ground hard, making plowing impossible and turning the promise of a bountiful harvest into a dusty dream. The farmer was a constant observer of the sky, his future often written in the shifting patterns of clouds and the direction of the wind. A dark cloud on the horizon was not merely a visual cue, it was a potential disruption to days, even weeks, of carefully planned labor. The gentle warmth of a spring day, however, brought with it a profound sense of hope and purpose. So, as we watched the farmer and his family labor in the fields, their forms growing smaller in the distance as the sun climbs higher, we understand a bit more about the very real dedication and toil that went into coaxing life from the soil. The rhythmic turning of the earth, the careful placement of each seed, the silent prayers for cooperative weather, these were the daily dramas played out on the vast stage of the 1930s farm, a tireless dance with nature that defined the very essence of their existence. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a quieter time, to the rhythm of a 1930s farm, allowing the gentle hum of history to lull us into a peaceful slumber. Settle into your most comfortable space, perhaps dimming the lights, and simply let these words wash over you. If, by the end, you find yourself feeling delightfully serene, a soft tap on the like button or a quiet subscription would be a lovely way to let us know. Now, as the dawn lightened the sky over the old farmhouse, signaling the start of a new day, the farmer's footsteps, though weary from earlier chores, held a certain purpose as he turned his attention to the barns and the various animal shelters. This was a time when the well-being of every creature under his care was not merely a matter of routine, but a central pillar upon which the very survival of the family and the farm itself rested. The livestock were more than just animals, they were living capital, suppliers of milk, eggs, meat, and muscle power, and their health was thus paramount, responsibility taken with solemn, quiet dedication. The first order of business, often even before the full light of morning, was the rhythmic sound of hay being pitched into stalls, a rustling whisper against the quiet backdrop of the waking farm. Each animal, from the stoic dairy cows lowing softly for their morning ration to the eager pigs grunting their anticipation, received its carefully measured portion. The smell of sweet Timothy hay, green and earthy, mingled with the faint, comforting aroma of warm milk and damp straw, creating a sensory tapestry unique to the barn. Feed was not simply thrown down, it was distributed with an eye to each animal's specific needs, the farmer observing their condition with a practiced gaze, noting any changes in appetite or demeanor that might hint at a burgeoning issue. Beyond the immediate satisfaction of a full trough, the cleanliness of the animal's living quarters was a task of ceaseless repetition, yet one of profound importance. Shovels scraped against concrete or packed earth floors, gathering soiled straw and manure, a daily ritual that prevented the buildup of disease and maintained a healthier environment for all. New, dry straw, carefully chosen for its softness and absorbency, would then be spread thickly, turning each stall into a fresh, inviting bed. The process was slow, deliberate, each movement measured, the muscles working with a familiar rhythm. The air, initially heavy, would soon lighten, taking on the faint, clean scent of fresh bedding, a promise of comfort for the animals when they returned from pasture or settled in for the night. This meticulous attention to hygiene was an unspoken language of care, a protective barrier against the myriad ailments that could sweep through a herd or flock, decimating a family's livelihood in a matter of days. Then there was the constant vigil over the fences, the woven strands of wire or sturdy old wood that defined the boundaries of their grazing lands and protected them from wandering. A broken fence could mean lost animals, damaged crops, or vulnerability to hungry predators that lurked just beyond the farm's perimeter. The farmer, often with a coil of fresh wire slung over his shoulder or a hammer tucked into his belt, would patrol the fence lines, his eyes scanning for sagging posts, snapped wires, or loose rails. Each mend was a patch on the fabric of the farm's security, a quiet act of preservation. The rhythmic clang of the hammer against a staple, the taut pull of a new wire, these were the small, persistent sounds of a farm maintained, of vigilance enacted. It wasn't exciting work, but it was essential, a grounding task that spoke of steady, unending care. Monitoring the health of the animals was perhaps the most nuanced and challenging aspect of their daily care. There were no veterinarians making routine house calls to distant farms in the 1930s, not in the way we understand it today. Often, the farmer himself, guided by generations of inherited wisdom and keenly honed observation, was the primary diagnostician and healer. A cow that seemed a little less bright-eyed, a chicken with ruffled feathers, a pig that lagged behind its littermates, these were not things to be ignored. Each subtle shift from the norm was a potential signal, requiring careful observation. Was the animal eating properly? Was its breathing clear? Were its movements fluid or stiff? There were home remedies, passed down through families, for common ailments, poultices for wounds, herbal concoctions for digestive upset, or careful isolation for animals showing signs of contagious illness. Sometimes, a more drastic measure was needed, a careful, measured intervention. The birth of new life, too, demanded constant attention, especially with larger animals. A calving cow in distress or a sow farrowing a large litter required the farmer's patient, often sleepless, presence, offering assistance where needed, guiding the process with a gentle, experienced hand. The tiny, vulnerable forms of newborns, tottering on unsteady legs, were a poignant reminder of the cycle of life and the immense responsibility that came with it. The very air of the barn was a canvas of life, the soft clucking of hens in their coop, the contented munching of cows, the occasional bleat of a sheep, the drowsy snorts of pigs. These were the gentle, steady sounds of productivity, of life unfolding, each sound a testament to the fact that these animals were thriving under the farmer's vigilant eye. Their well-being was inextricably linked to the farm's fortunes, a living barometer of its health. A healthy herd meant plentiful milk for butter and cheese, strong oxen for plowing the fields, and sturdy chickens for eggs and occasional Sunday dinner. The absence of disease, the vibrancy in their eyes, the smoothness of their coats, these were the quiet markers of a farmer's success, a testament to his persistent, unwavering devotion to the creatures who shared his life and his land. And as the sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows across the barnyard, the work of caring for these animals, though continuous, moved into its next natural phase, an ever-present, grounding rhythm of the farm. As the morning's labors began to wind down, a gentle easing of tension would ripple across the farm. The sun, by now, had climbed to its zenith, casting the shortest shadows across the fields, a silent signal that the day's most significant meal was approaching. This midday repast, rather than being called lunch as we might now, was known as dinner, a substantial and deeply anticipated event that punctuated the rhythm of the farming day, offering a crucial moment for both physical replenishment and a brief, yet profound, pause in the ceaseless demands of farm life. The approach of dinner would be subtly heralded, perhaps by the distant clang of a pot or the rising scent of cooking that would, on a breeze, carry itself across the yard, gently coaxing weary bodies towards the farmhouse. This meal, though simple in its ingredients and preparation, was always built on the bedrock of sustenance, designed to refill the depleted energy reserves of those who toiled from dawn. It aimed not for culinary extravagance, but for hearty satisfaction, ensuring that hands and minds would be ready to resume their tasks for the afternoon. Inside the farmhouse, the scene would be one of quiet industry. A large, sturdy table, often scrubbed bare and worn smooth from generations of use, would be set with whatever was available from the farm's bounty. There would be no delicate place settings or elaborate presentation, but a pragmatic scattering of plates, perhaps mugs for water or milk, and the ever-present implements for eating. The food itself would emerge from the kitchen, carried in large serving bowls and platters, each dish reflecting the season and the family's economic realities. Imagine a simple meat stew, perhaps made with an older chicken or a tougher cut of pork, slow-simmered for hours over a wood-burning stove, its rich aroma filling every corner of the modest home. Alongside this, there might be a generous helping of boiled potatoes, dug from the garden just weeks before, their skins still carrying the faint traces of the earth from which they came. Perhaps a bowl of greens, turnip tops or collards, cooked until tender, seasoned with a bit of salt pork for flavor and richness. And always, an ample supply of freshly baked bread, dense and substantial, made from flour that might have been milled locally, its crust golden brown and its interior soft, perfect for soaking up the last delicious vestiges of gravy from a plate. The gathering at the table would be swift and unceremonious. Farmers and their hands, children and wives, would file in, washing up at a pump outside or in a basin in the kitchen before taking their places. Conversation, if it occurred, would be practical and often brief, focusing on the tasks completed that morning or the plans for the afternoon. There was little leisure for lingering, but rather an urgent need to consume the nourishing food placed before them, to restore the strength that the morning's labor had consumed. The act of eating itself would be an intensely focused affair. Each bite would be savored not for its gourmet qualities, but for its fundamental sustenance, for the energy it provided, for the momentary relief it offered from hunger. Plates would be cleaned thoroughly, perhaps with a final swipe of a bread crust, ensuring that no crumb of precious food was wasted. There were no elaborate desserts to follow, perhaps only a piece of fruit freshly picked, or a simple slice of pie made from last year's preserved apples, a small, sweet finish to a very satisfying meal. This midday dinner was not merely about filling bellies, it was a communal punctuation mark, a moment of collective respite in a demanding schedule. It was a time when the entire household paused, drawing together strength from shared food and quiet company before scattering once more to their respective duties. The energy garnered from this meal would fuel the afternoon's tasks, carrying them through until the lighter supper, or supper, later in the day. The satisfaction gleaned from a full stomach, from the warmth of the food, and the brief connection with family, would provide a quiet inner fortitude for the demanding hours that lay ahead in the fields and barns. The meal would be finished as quickly as it began, the table cleared, and the plates washed, as the relentless pull of the farm called everyone back to their work, refreshed and ready for the afternoon. And so, as the sun climbed a little higher but began its slow, deliberate descent towards the horizon, painting the sky with a softer, diffused light, the farmhouse would often see the family shift their focus to another set of tasks, each one equally woven into the fabric of daily survival. This part of the afternoon, perhaps from mid-afternoon until the first whispers of dusk, was frequently dedicated to either the rigorous, fulfilling work of harvesting or the meticulous, essential duties of mending and repair. The specific rhythm of nature, the turning of the seasons, dictated which of these endeavors took precedence. In the warmer months, particularly late summer and early autumn, the fields called out with their promise, and the afternoon might transform into a scene of quiet, concerted effort under the expansive sky. Families would venture out, sometimes with the children trailing behind, learning the subtle art of the harvest. If it was corn, the stalks, now mature and dry, would stand tall and golden, rustling gently in any passing breeze. Hands, strong and calloused, would reach in, shucking the ears, the dry husks peeling away to reveal the plump, firm kernels within. Each ear would be tossed into a waiting wagon or a sturdy burlap sack, the sound a soft thud, repeated again and again, a rhythm in harmony with the natural world. This was not a hurried, frantic operation, but rather a steady, almost meditative collection, ensuring that no precious grain was lost. The sun, though still warm, would cast longer shadows now, lengthening a little with each passing minute, a gentle reminder of the day's progression. Perhaps it was potatoes, buried patiently beneath the dark soil. Then, hoes and spades, often simple implements of wood and iron, would be employed with careful precision. The earth would be turned over, revealing the nourishing bounty hidden below, each potato unearthed a small victory, a tangible result of months of patient tending. Or, if it was apples, the orchard would become a haven of quiet industry, the sweet, crisp scent of ripening fruit filling the air. Ladders, often handmade and sturdy, would be propped against the boughs, and hands would reach up, plucking the apples with a gentle twist, ensuring the delicate skin remained unblemished. Each fruit would be placed carefully into baskets, ready for storage in cool cellars or for turning into cider or preserves. These were moments of direct connection with the land, a deep understanding of where sustenance truly came from, an appreciation that was felt in every muscle and every breath. However, when the harvest was not actively calling, perhaps during the quieter stretches of winter or in the periods between planting and maturity, the afternoons would often turn indoors, or to the sheltered confines of a barn or workshop, for the equally vital work of maintenance. A farm, even in its simplicity, was a complex ecosystem of tools, garments, and structures, all requiring constant attention to ensure their longevity. One might find a farmer in the quiet focus of repairing an implement, perhaps a hoe whose handle had cracked from years of use, or a plow whose blade had dulled and chipped. These tools were not easily replaced, and certainly not with a quick trip to a store. Instead, they were cherished possessions, often passed down through generations, and their repair was an act of both necessity and deep respect. Wood would be whittled and sanded, metal carefully hammered and sharpened, often by hand, sometimes over a small forge if available, the rhythmic clang of the hammer against the anvil a steady, comforting sound in the afternoon quiet. Every piece was essential, every repair a contribution to the farm's enduring efficiency. Indoors, particularly for the women and often the children, the afternoon might be dedicated to the patient art of mending. Clothes, worn from daily labor and countless washings, rarely reached a point of utter disrepair before being attended to. A torn seam, a frayed cuff, a hole worn through by a persistent elbow, these were not reasons to discard garments, but rather opportunities for quiet, focused restoration. The soft glow from a window, or perhaps a single lamp as the light began to fade, would illuminate nimble fingers as they guided a needle and thread. Patches, often cut from older, unusable garments, would be carefully selected, matched for color and texture where possible, and then painstakingly stitched into place. Each stitch was a small act of thrift, a way of extending the life of a treasured item, ensuring warmth and protection for the family. The quiet hum of the sewing machine, if one was fortunate enough to possess such a marvel, or the gentle rhythmic pull of thread by hand, would fill the air, a sound of peaceful industry. Socks, often knitted from homespun wool, were particularly prone to wear at the heels and toes. Darning, a meticulous technique of weaving new threads into the fabric to repair holes, was a common afternoon task. A darning egg, a smooth wooden or glass oval, would be inserted into the sock, providing a firm surface over which the new threads could be carefully woven, building a strong, lasting repair. This quiet, repetitive work was often accompanied by soft conversation, or simply the comfortable silence of shared purpose. Every single moment of these afternoons, whether spent under the open sky amidst the bounty of the earth or within the cozy confines of the farmhouse quietly repairing and restoring, was undeniably productive. There was little concept of down-time in the modern sense. Every task, no matter how small or seemingly mundane, contributed directly to the family's well-being, their sustenance, and the seamless operation of their farm. The afternoon was not merely a transition between morning and evening, but a vital chapter in the daily narrative of resourcefulness and quiet diligence, a period of sustained effort that brought forth the very fabric of their existence. It was a time of tangible making and mending, a continuous, gentle hum of life lived deeply and purposefully. And as the days began to shorten, carrying with them that distinct chill in the late afternoon air, a shift in the rhythms of the farm became palpable, turning our gaze from the vibrant abundance of the season to the pressing necessities of the lean months ahead. The fields, once a riot of verdant growth and burgeoning promise, had yielded their bounty, and now, the focus settled firmly upon the sacred art of preservation. This was not merely a chore, you understand, but a deeply ingrained ritual, a collaborative symphony played out by every member of the household, ensuring sustenance and comfort through the long, quiet winter. The pantry, or often a cool, dim cellar, was the heart of this endeavor, gradually transforming into a treasure trove of summer's golden offerings. Glass jars, their surfaces catching the stray shafts of sunlight that pierced the dust motes in the air, lined shelves with meticulous precision. Each one told a story of sun-ripened tomatoes, their juicy flesh simmered down into rich, fragrant sauces, or crisp green beans tucked snugly into brine, awaiting their moment on the dinner table. Canning, that venerable art, was a laborious but deeply satisfying process. It began with the careful selection of the finest produce, unblemished and firm, picked at the very peak of its flavor. Root vegetables, like carrots and beets, would be scrubbed until their vibrant hues shone through, while fruits, plums and peaches especially, would be gently blanched to loosen their skins, ready for their syrupy embrace. Sterilizing the jars and lids was a meticulous operation, often presided over by the eldest women, their hands practiced and sure. The air would grow thick with steam, carrying with it the sweet, earthy aroma of simmering fruit or the tangy scent of pickling spices. A large wash boiler, repurposed for this vital task, would bubble gently on the stove, holding half-gallon or quart jars submerged in their hot bath, creating that reassuring vacuum seal that promised safety and longevity. The ping of a properly sealed lid, a soft, almost imperceptible sound in the quiet kitchen, was a small but significant triumph, an affirmation of future provision. Each jar, once cooled, would be carefully labeled, perhaps with the year and the contents, a tiny record of nature's generosity and human diligence. Beyond the sweet and savory art of canning, drying offered another ancient and effective way to conquer the relentless march of time. Thin slices of apples, their pale white flesh slowly turning a caramel hue, would be spread carefully on large, clean cloths or screens, often placed in a sunny, airy spot, perhaps on a porch or in an unused attic space. The sun, our diligent and silent partner, would work its magic, slowly coaxing the moisture from each piece, concentrating its sweetness and preserving its goodness. Corn, plump and golden, would be cut from the cob and spread out to dry, sometimes even strung on long threads like edible beads, making for a most picturesque sight. Herbs, their delicate leaves radiating their aromatic oils, would be gathered into small bunches and hung upside down from rafters, gradually shriveling into potent packets of flavor. The gentle rustle of these drying treasures, stirred by an occasional breeze, added a quiet, almost meditative soundtrack to the homestead. And then there was salting, a technique as old as civilization itself, particularly crucial for preserving meats and certain vegetables. Cured hams, their rich, dark surfaces hinting at depths of flavor, would hang in cool, dry places, often a smokehouse, where a slow, smoldering fire of hickory or apple wood imparted its unique, savory essence. Fish, if caught in abundance, would be carefully cleaned and rubbed generously with coarse salt, then laid out to dry, their silvery scales catching the light. Even cabbage, a humble but resilient vegetable, found its destiny in fermentation, packed tightly into crocks with salt and spices to become sauerkraut, a tangy, vitamin-rich staple that would ward off winter's chill and provide essential nutrients when fresh produce was a distant memory. The air in the kitchen and cellar during these weeks would be a complex tapestry of scents, the sharp tang of vinegar, the heady sweetness of ripe fruit, the earthy aroma of root vegetables, and the subtle, smoky perfume of curing meat. It was a communal effort, a time when younger hands learned the patient art of shelling peas, or stringing beans, their fingers becoming nimble with repetition. Older eyes would carefully inspect each jar, each piece of dried fruit, looking for any imperfection that might threaten the winter store. Conversations would weave in and out of the steady rhythm of work, stories told, wisdom shared, the quiet hum of domestic industry filling the spaces between. This painstaking work, stretching over weeks and even months, was not just about putting food on the table. It was about security, about independence, about the profound satisfaction of knowing that, come what may, the family would be nourished through the barren months, sustained by the tangible fruits of their labor and the enduring wisdom of generations. The bounty of summer, captured and held, was a promise of warmth and life, patiently awaiting its reawakening in the heart of winter. The soft glow of the morning sun, which earlier had painted the eastern sky with muted hues, now fully illuminated the farmhouse, its light filtering gently through the kitchen windows, finding its way onto the sturdy wooden table. It was at this table, or sometimes earlier, still half asleep in their beds, that the farm's youngest residents would begin their day, their contributions often as vital to the family's survival as the hard toil of their parents. Children were not merely onlookers on a 1930s farm, they were, in a very real sense, an integral and indispensable part of its operation, their small hands and earnest efforts woven deeply into the fabric of daily life. Before the first clang of the school bell could even conceive of echoing across the fields, the farm children were already immersed in a rhythm of work, a quiet symphony of chores that began long before dawn, and stretched well into the day. For the boys, this might involve the careful feeding of livestock, carrying heavy pails of water from the well to thirsty animals, or perhaps assisting their fathers in the milking parlor, their small stools tucked beneath the warm flanks of a Jersey cow, learning the precise, gentle tug that yielded the morning milk. They learned to gather eggs from the clucking hens, their fingers carefully discerning the warm, fragile orbs from the straw, their senses attuned to the subtle movements and sounds of the barn. Sometimes, their tasks involved the preparation of firewood, splitting kindling for the morning stove, the scent of fresh cut wood filling the cool morning air, a promise of warmth in the hearth. The girls, with equal diligence, often began their day assisting their mothers in the bustling kitchen, the aroma of brewing coffee and baking bread filling the air. Their duties might include setting the table for breakfast, churning butter, a rhythmic, steady motion that turned cream into golden richness, or perhaps helping with the never-ending task of washing dishes, their hands submerged in water warmed by the wood fire, the bubbles sparkling in the early light. The mending of clothes, a careful darning of socks or patching of trousers, was also a common chore, their nimble fingers learning the intricate stitches that prolonged the life of well-worn garments. They would also assist in preparing the day's meals, peeling vegetables harvested just hours before, or carefully shelling peas, each pod holding a small treasure of garden green. Their contributions, though perhaps less physically strenuous than those of the boys, were no less constant, no less essential to the smooth functioning of the household. After a breakfast that often consisted of hearty, simple fare, oatmeal, eggs, perhaps some homemade bread, the children would prepare for school, their chores, for a brief interlude, set aside. The walk to the one-room schoolhouse, often a journey of several miles, was itself a part of the daily routine, their small figures tracing familiar paths over dusty roads or through fields, carrying their worn satchels and lunch pails. For many, the school was a beacon of learning, a place where they could gather with their peers, immerse themselves in lessons of arithmetic, reading, and history, their minds expanding with each new fact absorbed. The teacher, often a young woman with a formidable spirit, was the sole fount of knowledge, guiding them through their primers and their sums, preparing them for a world beyond the farm. However, the pursuit of formal education, noble and important as it was, often existed in a delicate balance with the immediate and pressing needs of the farm. The rhythm of the seasons, the cycles of planting and harvest, frequently took precedence over the strictures of the school calendar. During planting season, when the soil was ready to receive its precious cargo of seeds, or during the frantic, essential weeks of harvest, when crops needed to be gathered before the first frost, the schoolhouse often grew quiet, its benches empty. Children would be pulled from their lessons, their books temporarily set aside, to assist their families in the fields, their small hands, though still developing, playing a crucial role in bringing in the bounty that would feed them through the winter months. In the spring, they might be seen walking silently down the long rows of freshly tilled earth, carefully dropping seeds into the prepared furrows, their movements slow and methodical, each seed a promise of future sustenance. In the summer, under the oppressive heat of the sun, they would help with weeding, their fingers distinguishing between the tender shoots of young plants and the encroaching weeds that sought to stifle their growth. And in the autumn, during the harvest, they would be present in the fields, their bodies aching from the stooping and gathering, their arms laden with corn ears, potatoes, or ripe berries, their laughter and chatter somehow blending with the rustling of the drying stalks. The work was demanding, often stretching from early morning until the last rays of twilight faded from the sky, but there was also a profound sense of purpose, a quiet understanding of their contribution to the family's well-being, an unspoken pride in their essential role. Education, while valued, was often viewed through the practical lens of farm life. Learning to read was important for understanding farming journals or letters from distant relatives. Arithmetic was crucial for calculating yields and managing accounts, and some basic understanding of history and geography was seen as a way to broaden one's perspective, to connect with a world beyond the farm gate. Yet, the most immediate and tangible education many farm children received was not found in textbooks, but in the fields, in the barn, in the kitchen. They learned the language of the land, the habits of the animals, the intricate balance of nature, skills passed down through generations, essential for survival and prosperity. As the sun began its gentle descent toward the western horizon, casting long, soft shadows across the farm, the children's day would still be far from over. After returning from school, perhaps with homework still to be completed, they would once again resume their chores. The boys might help with the evening milking, or gather eggs for storage, while the girls might assist in preparing the evening meal, their hands nimble and practiced. There were always clothes to be folded, lamps to be trimmed and filled with kerosene, water to be fetched, and myriad other tasks that kept the household running smoothly. Their youthful energy was channeled into productive labor, their bodies growing stronger, their minds sharper with each new skill mastered. It was a life of hard work, of constant contribution, but it was also a life of deep connection to the land, to family, and to community. The children of the 1930s farm learned early of resilience, the dignity of honest labor, and the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent, their efforts bearing fruit, both literally and figuratively, for the well-being of their entire family. Their roles, though often heavy for their young years, instilled in them a profound sense of responsibility, shaping them into the stewards of the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their hands calloused, their spirits strong, their contributions woven, thread by thread, into the enduring tapestry of farm life. As the last vestiges of twilight softly faded from the western sky, painting the distant hills in hazy shades of violet and deep indigo, the rhythm of the farmhouse gently shifted. The demanding physical labor of the day, with its constant calls for attention and unwavering effort, gradually receded, making way for a quieter, more reflective pace. The air inside the home, which had perhaps hummed with the bustling energies of chores and preparations throughout the day, now seemed to settle, becoming still and suffused with a sense of warm anticipation. This evening interlude was a precious commodity, a brief but profoundly cherished respite that followed the sun's demanding course across the sky. It was a time when the relentless press of farm work, from sunup to sundown, at last offered a momentary reprieve, allowing weary bodies and minds a chance to unfurl and find a gentler equilibrium. There was no escaping the farm's insistent needs entirely, no true cessation of its perpetual cycle, but these evenings offered a small window, a quiet eddy in the rushing river of daily life. The primary source of illumination, as darkness steadily deepened outside, typically stemmed from the soft, comforting glow of kerosene lamps. These lamps, carefully trimmed and polished throughout the day, were now lit, their wicks coaxed into offering a steady, gentle flame. Their light, a warm, golden pool, spread across the immediate vicinity, defining the family's shared space. It cast long, dancing shadows upon the walls, causing familiar objects to take on new, intriguing dimensions, and creating an intimate, almost dreamlike atmosphere within the room. This wasn't the stark, all-encompassing brilliance of modern electric light, but rather a more personal, localized radiance that encouraged closeness and quiet contemplation. Around this luminous heart of the lamp, family members would often gather. The day's conversations, perhaps limited to practical instructions or brief observations during busy hours, would now expand, unfurling more slowly and deeply. There might be low, murmuring exchanges between husband and wife, discussing the day's successes or challenges, planning for tomorrow's tasks, or simply sharing the small, personal events that punctuated their existence. Children, perhaps finished with their own evening chores and studies, would listen, sometimes contributing their own quiet observations, absorbing the nuances of adult interaction. These were not boisterous discussions, but rather soft, contemplative exchanges, woven into the fabric of the evening's calm. Often, hands, though tired from the day's exertions, found new purpose in the gentle, repetitive motions of mending. Piles of socks, worn thin at the heels and toes from constant use, might be brought out, along with needles and spools of thread. The rhythmic rise and fall of the darning needle, passing in and out of the fabric, became a quiet, almost hypnotic accompaniment to the soft conversation. Patches, carefully cut from discarded cloth, might be meticulously stitched onto trousers or shirts, extending the life of much-needed garments. This was not merely a chore, but an act of practical care and resourcefulness, a quiet testament to the value placed on every item, and the diligent effort required to maintain a household with limited means. The subtle fragrance of wool and old cotton, mingled with the faint, comforting scent of kerosene, would often drift through the air. For those with a penchant for letters, or those rare souls fortunate enough to possess a small collection of books, these quiet evenings also offered a chance to escape into the printed page. A worn Bible, its pages softened and yellowed with age and frequent handling, might be opened, its familiar verses offering solace or reflection. Perhaps a borrowed newspaper, a few days old, would be unfolded, its headlines and articles devoured with a quiet intensity, bringing glimpses of the wider world into the insulated sphere of the farm. Stories of distant cities, political rumblings, or even serialized tales of adventure would, for a time, transport the reader far beyond the confines of their immediate surroundings. The gentle rustle of turning pages, the focused concentration etched on a reader's face, added another layer to the evening's tapestry of quiet domesticity. Sometimes, a family member might take up a craft, their hands deftly working with simple materials to create something of beauty or utility. Perhaps a mother might knit, the steady click of needles weaving yarn into a blanket or a scarf, envisioning the warmth it would provide in the colder months. Or a father might whittle a piece of wood, slowly shaping it into a simple toy for a child, or a useful household item, his concentration profound, his movements deliberate and unhurried. These small, creative acts were not merely pastimes, but extensions of the day's work, expressions of ingenuity and practicality, bringing satisfaction and a quiet sense of accomplishment. The sounds of the evening were distinct from those of the day. The distant lowing of cattle grew softer, the barking of dogs less urgent. Instead, the faint, persistent chirping of crickets would begin to filter in from outside, a constant, comforting chorus. The gentle whisper of the wind through the eaves, the soft crackle of a dying ember in the stove, or the almost imperceptible creak of old floorboards settling, would become more noticeable in the relative quiet. These were not intrusive noises, but rather the very fabric of the evening, weaving themselves into the fabric of the human activity within the home. As the hours drifted by, the lamplight eventually grew dimmer, the kerosene supply dwindling, signals that the day's final chapter was drawing to a close. The conversations would naturally taper off, the mending might be carefully folded away, and books would be set aside. A deep weariness, the honest and profound fatigue that comes from a day of honest physical labor, would begin to settle more insistently. But it was a satisfying weariness, a sense of having contributed, having worked hard, and having earned the approaching balm of sleep. This brief respite, these quiet moments shared in the gentle glow of the lamp, were more than just a pause. They were essential anchors in the rhythm of farm life, moments of connection, reflection, and quiet restoration. They provided the emotional and spiritual sustenance necessary to face the demanding dawn and the ceaseless circuit of farm work that awaited them with the new day. And as the lamps were finally extinguished, plunging the rooms into comfortable darkness, the residual warmth of these moments lingered, a soft glow in the mind as bodies finally found their rest. The farmhouse, having seen another day to its close, would sigh into its own quiet slumber, awaiting the sunrise. And so, as the golden light outside softened and stretched into long, purple shadows, we now turn our attention to the heart of the farmhouse at the close of the day. This was the time for the evening meal, universally known then, and cherished still, as supper. It bore a different rhythm from dinner, a more relaxed cadence, a quiet winding down after the fervent efforts that had threaded through the daylight hours. Dinner, you see, especially in the midst of a demanding workday, was often a substantial affair, a necessary replenishment for energy expended under the relentless sun or within the chill of an early morning barn. But supper was different. It carried the gentle promise of rest, a lighter offering to soothe the body and mind before the profound stillness of sleep enveloped the farm once more. Perhaps there would be leftovers from the midday meal, thoughtfully revived and presented with a fresh simple accompanying dish. A delicate vegetable stew, simmered slowly and tasting of the garden's bounty, might appear. Or perhaps a plate of warmed biscuits, their golden brown tops inviting a dollop of fresh cream and a spoonful of homemade blackberry jam, an exquisite sweetness to close the day. A bowl of thick, comforting porridge, stirred with care, might be served, its warmth spreading throughout the body, preparing it for the cool touch of sleep. A simple cheese from the springhouse, firm and fragrant, alongside some slices of homemade bread, could also suffice, offering sustenance without burden. The preparation was often less involved than dinner, allowing the women of the household, who had toiled just as diligently in their own spheres throughout the day, a moment of reprieve, a gentle lessening of their industrious pace. Yet, despite its often simpler fare, supper was, without question, one of the most significant gatherings of the day. It was the magnet that drew every member of the family back into the warm embrace of the home, pulling them away from the fields, the barn, the chicken coop, or the distant woodlet, towards the central hearth, towards each other. The kitchen, or perhaps the dining room if the family possessed one and the evening felt less hurried, would once again hum with a soft, comforting murmur. The scent of wood smoke from the stove, mingling with the aroma of the evening's meal, would create an atmosphere of profound domesticity, a sensory blanket that wrapped around all who entered. Chairs would be drawn close to the table, perhaps a sturdy wooden one, worn smooth by generations of hands, its surface reflecting the soft glow of a kerosene lamp or a single electric bulb if the farm had been fortunate enough to connect to the burgeoning power grid. This was less a meal and more a communion, a daily ritual connecting souls after hours of focused, often isolated, labor. The day's events, once dispersed, were now brought together, shared, and understood within the circle of loved ones. And so, amid the gentle clinking of forks against plates, and the soft rustle of clothing as family members settled, the stories would begin. These weren't grand narratives, but the small, poignant chronicles of a day lived. The farmer might speak of a particular patch of corn, growing taller each day under the benevolent sun, or express a quiet concern about an approaching cloudburst, a necessary worry for the well-being of his crops. He might recount a brief observation of a fox darting across the farthest field, a fleeting glimpse of wildness amidst the cultivated order. The eldest son might chip in, perhaps with a humorous tale about a stubborn mule, or the surprising cleverness of a young cow, bringing a small smile to his mother's lips. The daughters might share quiet observations from their chores, perhaps a particularly challenging batch of butter that finally yielded to their patient churning, or a discovery of a new nest of baby chicks, their soft cheeps a testament to burgeoning life. The very youngest, perhaps still a little sleepy from the day's adventures, might offer a simple, profound statement about a butterfly they had seen, its wings a kaleidoscope of colors against the green background of the garden. These stories, often simple, often repetitive in their essence, wove a delicate tapestry of shared experience. They were the threads that bound the family together, allowing each member to glimpse, if only briefly, into the lives of others, understanding their triumphs, their minor frustrations, their quiet moments of wonder. Through these recounted events, a child learned not just about the work their father did, but also about his patience, his worries, his quiet joy in a good harvest. A mother gained insight into her children's burgeoning independence, their growing responsibilities, and the small victories that punctuated their days. Beyond the recounting of daily life, supper was also the quiet crucible where the next day's plans might be gently forged and discussed. The farmer, with a pensive look at the half-eaten potatoes on his plate, might muse aloud about the particular field that needed plowing next, or the repairs required for a fence damaged by the recent winds. The menfolk, no longer burdened by the immediate demands of labor, could offer their thoughts, their suggestions, their quiet agreements. It was a democratic process, though often unspoken, a collective understanding forming around the table. Perhaps certain vegetables from the garden were nearing their peak, and the canning schedule for tomorrow needed to be reiterated. Or there might be a need for all available hands to help with a specific task, like bringing in the hay if the weather promised a sunny stretch. These decisions, critical for the smooth operation of the farm, were often not hammered out with great fanfare, but rather emerged naturally from the conversation, a seamless extension of the day's closing. There might be a gentle suggestion from the wife about the need to mend a particular garment for Saturday's market trip, or a reminder for one of the children about an early start needed for milking. And so, as the evening deepened, and the outside world faded into a velvety darkness punctuated only by the distant hoot of an owl or the croaking of frogs from the pond, the supper table remained a beacon of warmth and connection. It was a time for nourishment, yes, but also for something far more profound, the cultivation of family bonds, the gentle sharing of burdens and joys, and the quiet, steady rhythm of life preparing for another sunrise, another day on the farm. Each story told, each plan quietly discussed, was a thread in the rich fabric of their shared existence, drawing them closer, making them strong. And so, as the day's tasks slowly receded into the twilight, the farmer's mind, ever diligent, would already begin to drift, gently, towards the promises and perils of the day to come. Even in those moments of respite, when the body yearned for stillness and the eyes grew heavy with the weight of spent hours, a quiet, almost meditative, preparation would often unfold. It was not a frantic rush, nor a demanding chore, but rather a slow, deliberate winding down of the present that seamlessly, almost imperceptibly, transitioned into the thoughtful anticipation of the future. The rhythm of farm life, you see, was a continuous, flowing current, and even the smallest eddies of evening calm were part of that larger, inexorable movement. One might, for instance, find the farmer or one of the older children, or perhaps even the grandmother, moving with a soft and unhurried grace through the tool shed, where the implements of their daily toil resided. Each shovel, each hoe, each rake had been a faithful companion through the sun's arcing journey, and like any good friend, they deserved a moment of care before their rest. Dust and clinging earth, remnants of the day's hard work, would be gently brushed away with a stiff, dry cloth, or perhaps a hand, calloused and knowing. A quick inspection, a tactile exploration, might reveal a loose handle, a dull blade, a small imperfection that, if left unattended, could blossom into a larger problem tomorrow. These were not repairs to be undertaken with urgency but rather noted, tucked away in the back of the mind, destined for a quiet hour of mending. Perhaps a splash of linseed oil on the wooden grip of a favorite hoe, rubbed in with patient circular motions, would preserve its integrity, deepen its luster, and ensure a comfortable, splinter-free hold come morning. The tools, returning to their designated hooks or corners, seemed to exhale a collective sigh of contentment, ready for their brief interlude before the call of dawn. Then there was the feed, a vital artery of the farm's very existence. The chickens, the pigs, the cows, each had their particular needs, their specific dietary allowances that ensured their well-being and, by extension, the well-being of the entire household. It was not uncommon for the farmer to step into the barn again, the air thick with the sweet, earthy scent of hay and the warm, slightly musky aroma of livestock, to ensure that the barrels and bins were adequately stocked for the first hungry stirrings of the animals before sunup. Scoops of corn, measured out with practiced ease, might be poured into larger buckets, ready to be carried out at the crack of dawn. Bales of hay, weighty and fragrant, would be rearranged, pulled closer to the manger, so that the morning's feeding would be as swift and efficient as possible, conserving precious light and energy. The sound of grain rustling, the soft thunk of a bucket being placed, these were the subtle symphonies of preparation, heard only in the deep quiet of the evening. And beyond the specific tasks of tools and feed, there was a general readiness, a quiet maintaining of order that permeated every corner of the farmstead. Latches on gates would be checked, ensuring that no frisky lamb or curious pig could wander off into the pre-dawn darkness. The water pump, a central hub of daily life, might be given a cursory glance, its handle firm, its spout clear. The clothesline, now bare and swaying gently in the cooling breeze, would be taken down and folded, a small act of tidiness that spoke volumes about the mindful anticipation of the day to come. The woodpile, diminished by the evening's cooking and heating, might see a few more logs brought in and stacked neatly by the back door, guaranteeing a warm hearth for the morning's breakfast. These were not grand gestures, but small, deliberate acts of foresight, woven into the very fabric of their lives. This preparation, you see, was more than just a series of chores. It was a philosophy. It was an acknowledgement of the farm's enduring cycle, a deep respect for the rhythms of nature, and an understanding that diligence in the evening eased the burdens of the morning. It was a tangible expression of hope, a quiet assertion that tomorrow would indeed come, bringing with it new opportunities for growth, for sustenance, for continuation. As the fire outside might dwindle to a soft glow, and the last stars began to prick holes in the velvet expanse above, the farmer could finally, truly, surrender to the night, knowing that a measure of readiness had been secured, and that the rising sun, whenever it chose to reveal itself, would find them, in their gentle, unhurried way, prepared. Tonight, we drift back to a time when lives were intimately woven with the rhythms of the earth, a time when daybreak brought with it the promise of honest labor, and dusk settled like a soft blanket over weary bodies. As we explore the gentle cadences of this bygone era, allow yourself to sink into your own comfortable space. Perhaps you might dim your lights, and simply let the soft murmur of this story wash over you. If, by the end, you find yourself feeling a little more rested, a little more at peace, perhaps you would consider leaving a gentle like, or even subscribing, to join us again on these quiet journeys. As the sun, that tireless director of the day's drama, finally dipped below the distant tree-line, painting the western sky in hues of deep violet and fading rose, the final embers of daylight began to recede from the farm. It had been a day of relentless physical exertion, a symphony of muscle and will played out against the backdrop of fields and barnyards. The air, which had hummed with the industrious sounds of morning and afternoon, now held a different cadence, a softened whisper of cricket song and the rustling of leaves stirred by an evening breeze. Inside the farmhouse, the last flickering oil lamps cast long, dancing shadows upon familiar walls. The remnants of the evening meal, perhaps a hearty stew or simple bread and milk, had been cleared away. Dishes, washed by hand and stacked neatly in the draining rack, gleamed faintly in the dim light. The scent of wood smoke, mingled with the earthy aroma of soil carried in from countless chore-filled steps, still clung gently to the air, a comforting perfume of home and hard work. The farmhouse itself, a silent witness to generations of toil and triumph, now began its transition into the quietude of night. The cracks and groans of settling timbers, the gentle sigh of old floorboards, became more apparent in the stillness, murmuring stories of hot summer days and long winter nights. Each sound was a familiar companion, a lullaby woven into the very fabric of the family's existence. For the farmer and his wife, and indeed for any children old enough to participate in the day's duties, the sense of weariness was profound and all-encompassing. It was not merely a mental fatigue, but a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that seeped into every muscle and joint. The sheer volume of physical labor demanded by farm life in the 1930s meant that rest was not a luxury, but a fundamental necessity, as vital as food and water. The simple ritual of preparing for bed was performed with a methodical slowness, each movement deliberate, conserving what little energy remained. Perhaps a final sweep of the kitchen floor with a straw broom, the soft swish a gentle closure to the day's domestic tasks. Or the last check of the stove, ensuring the fire was banked safely for the night's cooler temperatures, a final glow casting transient warmth into the room before being veiled. Personal hygiene was, by necessity, a simple affair. Hot water would have been carefully heated on the stove, or in a large kettle over the open fire, and transported to a wash basin. A quick wash of face and hands, often shared among family members as a basin of water went from one person to the next, was typically sufficient. The feeling of warm water on tired skin, a small luxury after hours spent in the elements, might have felt like a tender blessing. The rough, homespun towels dried the skin, leaving a wholesome, clean scent. Clothing, often mended and remended, was carefully folded and laid out for the next day, a testament to thrift and practicality. There were no elaborate preparations, no lengthy nighttime routines. Efficiency born of necessity guided every action. As each family member made their way to their respective sleeping spaces, a profound sense of quiet descended. The only light now might be the faint glow from the moon filtering through a windowpane, or the soft, steady burning of a single candle, its flame a tiny beacon against the vast dark. Children, often sharing beds or sleeping on straw-filled pallets, would likely have been asleep almost before their heads hit the pillow, their young bodies utterly spent from a day of chores and play. For the adults, the transition to sleep was often swift and absolute. There might be a brief moment of quiet reflection, a silent accounting of the day's accomplishments, the plans for tomorrow swirling gently in the mind's eye before fading. The sound of crickets outside, the occasional distant hoot of an owl, or the very subtle sounds of livestock settling in the barn, would have been the natural lullabies of their rural world. Sleep itself was not just a respite, it was a deep, restorative process, essential for the arduous demands of the farm. The body, having been pushed to its limits, craved this period of inactivity, a chance to mend and revitalize. Every fiber, every muscle, every cell was in need of this vital renewal. There was a profound honesty to this exhaustion, a direct correlation between the effort expended and the depth of rest earned. Tomorrow, the sun would rise again, relentless and unyielding, signaling the start of another day. And with it, another round of chores, another cycle of planting, tending, harvesting, and milking would begin. So, tonight's sleep was not merely a break, but a critical preparation. It was the necessary rebuilding of strength, the quiet gathering of resilience, ensuring that when the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky, they would be ready to face it once more, with renewed purpose and enduring spirit. The farm demanded it, and their bodies, in their profound wisdom, understood this fundamental truth. Tonight, we drift back to a gentle age, to the quiet rhythms of a 1930s farm, as the day's last light softens into twilight. Please, get comfortable, dim the lights if you wish, and allow your thoughts to settle as we explore the quiet corners of this bygone world. If, by the end, you find a measure of peace in our journey, perhaps consider a quiet like or subscribe. As the farmhouse itself finally settled into slumber, a different kind of life, a nighttime existence, began its soft, imperceptible unfoldings across the landscape. Even in the deepest hours of what we might call sleep, the farm was never entirely silent. It merely exchanged the boisterous calls of day for a symphony of whispers, a hushed chorus that spoke of the land's enduring vitality. The wind, a constant, unseen presence throughout the day, now seemed to embrace the trees with a more intimate, almost reverent caress. Its rustling through the leaves of the ancient oaks behind the barn, or the younger poplars lining the lane, was less a bluster and more a soft, persistent sigh, a sound that could easily be mistaken for the distant swish of a velvet curtain drawing closed. Each tree, with its unique leaf shape and density, contributed a subtle variation to this arboreal whisper, creating a layer of sound that was both consistent and endlessly nuanced, a natural white noise tailored by nature itself. From the wooded fringes that bordered the farm's fields, where the shadows deepened into impenetrable inky blackness, there often came the distinct, resonant echo of an owl's hoot. Not the shrill, startling shriek of some nocturnal predator, but the deep, measured hoo-hoo-hoo of a great horned owl, perhaps, or the softer, more undulating call of a barred owl. These were not calls of distress or alarm, but rather a profound declaration of presence, a sound that underscored the wilderness just beyond the cultivated fields. It was an ancient sound, connecting the farm life to the untamed world, a gentle reminder that even as man tamed portions of the earth, wild majesty continued its timeless watch. The sound would ripple through the cool night air, seeming to hang suspended for a moment before dissolving into the vastness, leaving behind a profound sense of quietude. And then, from within the barn itself, or the nearby sheds where the smaller creatures rested, there were the soft, intimate murmurs of sleeping animals. The gentle snorts of a dozing horse, perhaps shifting its weight imperceptibly on straw bedding, sending a faint rustle through the deep hay. The low, rhythmic breathing of a cow, a soft exhalation that occasionally punctuated the otherwise still air, often accompanied by the almost inaudible chewing of cud even in sleep, a testament to their continuous digestive process. A very faint baa from a lamb nestled close to its mother, a sound of utter contentment and security. Even the restless scratching of a chicken settling deeper onto its roost, a sound so slight it might be entirely imagined, contributed to this tapestry of night. These were not the urgent noises of daytime feeding or the bustle of human interaction, these were the sounds of peace, of creatures utterly at rest, their bodies yielding to the deep, restorative currents of sleep. They formed, in their collective subtlety, a natural lullaby, a comforting, unobtrusive hum that wrapped itself around the sleeping farmhouse. This nocturnal soundscape was a world away from the clamor of the day. The clatter of milk pails, the rhythmic thud of an axe splitting wood, the shouts of children at play, the distant rumble of a tractor engine, all these were folded away, replaced by a gentle, constant stream of organic sounds. It was a time when the senses sharpened, where the absence of bright light made the ears more attuned to the delicate intricacies of sound. The mind, relieved of the necessity to process visual information, would drift, caught by the slow, deliberate pulse of the sleeping farm. The air itself transformed, growing cooler, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp soil after a dewfall, or the sweeter, almost floral aroma of blossoming clover from a nearby field, a fragrance intensified by the night's hush. This was the farm breathing, softly, deeply, preparing itself for the rebirth of another dawn. It was a deeply immersive quiet, rich with life, yet profoundly still. A quiet that invited contemplation, or, perhaps more aptly, a quiet that invited a deep and undisturbed sleep. It was the farm's final embrace before the light returned. Tonight, we drift back to a simpler time, a time when the rhythms of life were intrinsically linked to the sun and the soil. As you settle into your most comfortable space, perhaps dimming the lights to a soft glow, let's explore the quieter moments of a 1930s farm, a place where each sunrise brought with it a renewed purpose, and each sunset, a sense of completion. Should you find a measure of peace in these words, a gentle like or subscribe would be appreciated. Each day on the 1930s farm carried with it a certain inevitability, a steadfast repetition that mirrored the turning of the seasons themselves. It was a life woven from threads of persistent effort, a continuous loop of tasks that began before the sun cast its first golden rays and concluded long after the stars began to twinkle in the vast, inky sky. This was not a life of sudden shifts or unexpected luxuries, rather, it was a finely tuned machine, driven by the demands of the land and the unwavering needs of the animals that populated its fields and barns. Imagine, if you will, the slow, deliberate turning of the earth, as winter surrendered its icy grip to the burgeoning warmth of spring. With this seasonal transition came a flurry of preparations, the careful planning of planting, the meticulous repair of fences, the constant attention to newly born calves or chicks. Every action was a direct response to the unfolding narrative of nature, a practical demonstration of humankind's deep connection to the earth's cycles. There was no room for delay, no luxury of procrastination. Each task, however small, contributed directly to the ultimate success or failure of the season's harvest, to the very sustenance of the family. As spring blossomed into summer, the pace intensified, a subtle but palpable quickening of activity. The fields, once fallow and quiet, now teemed with life, the young shoots pushing bravely through the rich, dark soil, reaching towards the benevolent sun. Weeds, a persistent and unceasing adversary, demanded constant vigilance, their removal a continuous chore performed under the relentless summer sun. The garden, too, offered its bounty, a kaleidoscope of colors and textures, each vegetable requiring careful tending, its ripeness a signal for harvest. Evenings would often find the family gathered, shelling peas or husking corn, the rhythmic sounds of their work a gentle accompaniment to the chirping crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. The harvest season, undoubtedly the most crucial time of the year, brought with it a different kind of intensity. It was a period of sustained effort, a race against time and the impending threat of changing weather. Every able body, from the youngest child to the eldest grandparent, contributed to the monumental task of bringing in the crops. The air would be thick with the smells of drying hay and ripening grain, a fragrant testament to the season's generosity. The days were long, stretching from dawn till dusk and often beyond, illuminated by the shifting beams of lanterns as work continued into the cool, silent hours of the night. There was a shared understanding, an unspoken agreement that this was the year's pinnacle, the culmination of all the preceding months of toil. And then, as autumn painted the landscape in hues of fiery red and burnt orange, a different set of tasks emerged. The preserving of food for the long, cold winter months became paramount. Rows of gleaming jars, filled with canned fruits and vegetables, lined pantry shelves, a visual testament to foresight and hard work. Animals were prepared for colder weather, their shelters mended and their feed supplies carefully managed. The farm began its slow retreat, drawing inward, preparing for the dormant period, a time of reflection and gradual replenishment. Winter, though often seen as a quieter period, still held its own demands. The animals required constant care, their warmth and nourishment a daily responsibility. Repairs to equipment and buildings, often postponed during the busier seasons, now took center stage. There were logs to be split, fires to be tended, and snow to be cleared. The routine was simply different, less outwardly frantic, but no less essential. It was a time for mending, for planning, for the quiet anticipation of the next spring, the next turning of the wheel. Through all these seasons, through the endless cycle of planting and harvesting, feeding and tending, a profound sense of quiet perseverance permeated the farm. There was a dignity in the hard work, a deep satisfaction in seeing the tangible results of one's efforts. It was a life lived in direct communion with the elements, a constant negotiation with nature's unpredictable temperament. Success was earned through sweat and patience, through an unwavering dedication to the earth and its offerings. Each sunrise brought a challenge, and each sunset, the quiet knowledge of a day well spent, a contribution made to the ongoing dance of life on the farm. It was a rhythmic existence, a constant ebb and flow, where the only true constant was the enduring spirit of those who worked the land, day after quiet day. Tonight, we drift back to a time of simpler rhythms, of sun-drenched fields and hands calloused by honest labor. We journey to an American farm in the 1930s, a place where the earth dictated the pace of life, and each day unfolded with a predictable, yet profound, beauty. As we explore the intricate ballet of chores and seasons, perhaps you might find a quiet corner, dim the lights, and settle into a comfortable stillness. Tonight, we embrace the gentle hum of history, and if, by its end, you find yourself so inclined, a quiet tap on the like button or a gentle subscription would be a most welcome gesture, a small acknowledgement of our shared journey into the past. We have traversed the long hours, from the pre-dawn stirrings to the quiet of twilight, and as the last echoes of the day's labor fade, we arrive at a moment of reflection. This portrayal, this slow unfolding of a day on a 1930s farm, offers us a glimpse, a soft impression of a way of life that, in so many ways, stands in stark contrast to the swift currents of our modern world. It was a life deeply entwined with the earth, a rhythm dictated not by clocks and appointments, but by the rising and setting of the sun, by the unyielding demands of the livestock, and the subtle whispers of the changing seasons. The very fabric of existence was woven with threads of self-reliance, a virtue honed by necessity. The farm family of the 1930s was, in essence, a microcosm of industry, a self-sustaining unit. From the churning of butter to the mending of clothes, from the planting of seeds to the harvesting of crops, a vast array of skills resided within the household. There was little room for specialization in the way we understand it today, only a broad competency born of daily engagement with the necessities of life. The hands that milked the cows in the morning might, by afternoon, be coaxing a stubborn engine back to life, or by evening, be deftly stitching a torn garment. This manifold capability fostered a deep sense of independence, a quiet confidence in one's ability to meet the challenges presented by the land and the times. The connection to the land was not merely a practical one, it was profoundly intimate, almost spiritual. The farmer and his family understood the subtle language of the soil, the changing hues of the sky, the unique temperament of each animal. They learned to anticipate, to observe, to respond. The success of their endeavors, often their very survival, depended upon this keen understanding, this empathetic relationship with their natural surroundings. The fields were not just parcels of dirt, they were living entities, responsive to care and neglect. The cows and chickens were not simply commodities, they were integral members of the farm ecosystem, contributors to the household sustenance, and often, companions in the quiet labor of the day. This deep connection fostered a profound respect, an understanding that humanity was but one thread in the intricate tapestry of nature. While the methods and technologies were undeniably different, often simpler, more labor-intensive than those of today, this era, this way of farming, laid an undeniable foundation for modern agriculture. The principles of crop rotation, of soil enrichment, of animal husbandry, though practiced with different tools and at a different scale, were nevertheless present, evolving from generations of practical experience. The hard-won knowledge, passed down through families, formed the bedrock upon which subsequent advancements were built. Many of the fundamental understanding of how to work with the earth, how to nurture life from it, solidified during these decades of close communion with the soil. Picture the farmer, pausing at the end of a long furrow, wiping a brow beaded with sweat, looking out over his cultivated land. There is a quiet satisfaction in his gaze, a sense of accomplishment that transcends the purely economic. It is the satisfaction of creation, of sustenance, of having nurtured life from the stubborn earth. This profound connection, this inherent self-reliance, though perhaps no longer central to our daily urban lives, remains a resonant echo in our collective memory. It speaks to a fundamental human desire to be connected to the source of our sustenance, to understand the processes that bring food to our tables, and to appreciate the profound labor involved. As we conclude our journey through a day on a 1930s farm, we can almost feel the texture of the rough cotton work clothes, smell the earthy scent of turned soil, hear the distant lowing of a cow in the evening quiet. We carry with us a lingering impression of a life lived in harmony with the natural world, a testament to the resilience, the ingenuity, and the quiet dignity of those who worked the land under the broad, endless skies. It is a reminder that even in the quietest corners of history, there are profound lessons to be found, gentle whispers that can still calm the restless mind, and offer a tranquil perspective on the enduring rhythms of life. Good night.